Let's move on to plane. So I'm going to change my fall off type to plane, and I'm just going to reset my transforms here. Make sure everything else is where it needs to be. All right. So we'll set our initial plane here to be set up on probably the Z axis. I think will be all right for us. So what we'll do is basically I'm just going to copy this sphere setup here. And I'll label this. Just pasting the sphere, and I'll call this plane. And now we'll change our icon type to planes. And I think we can set our uniform scale back down to 1 on these. We'll merge that into our switch. And let's take a look here at what we need to change. So we definitely don't want all axes. I think we're going to want the YX plane. And let me just check and see. Yes, that should be aligned to the Z-axis. Do the same there. Okay, so instead of doing scale with this, we're going to delete that out. And we'll delete outer out from there. I'm just going to copy that before I delete it. And actually scale needs to be set to 1. And let's take a quick look at maybe the initial size for just our icon. Maybe we'll set the icon to 4 again. Seems to be a good default for a 1-unit grid. So we'll define the distance here as a movement on the Z-axis. So I'm just going to paste that for outer. And then we'll go back to our inner, and we'll just change that to inner. And of course I need to see that. Okay, so I see that moving, I see inner moving. So that's working how it needs to work. Now let's go hook this up. We'll go into our geo network here, into the subnet, back into our fall off section here. And we will just, I'm just going to copy, I don't know, we'll just copy the sphere again to start with. And we'll change this to plane. Okay, so I think most of this can stay, except D is not going to be equal to a distance. It's only going to be equal to the Z component. Basically, where's the Z component? And then what we'll do is we'll say that if the Z component is already below our threshold value, that it's always going to be 1. So we'll do a little if-then statement, but first we'll just kind of map the D here. So D is equal to basically my P dot Z. And that should set that, but I'm not 100% sure that that's clamping the values, so I just do want to check that. I'm going to look at our effect. And maybe that's actually all we need to do, but let's take a quick look, play around with it, and see. Seems like that's working okay. Yeah, I think the fit statement is actually taking care of our clamp for us, which then allows this to work how it needs to work. And just checking by rotating this as well. And I can see that our gradient is staying where it needs to be. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to save this subnet and dive inside here and save that subnet. And just one quick note before I do move on. If you did want this to work both ways rather than using this plane as a basically everything on one side of it being equal to 1, all you'd have to do is wrap this in an absolute value statement like that. And that'll basically give you a fall off. That should work a bit like that. I think that's right. Let's take a quick gander there. Yeah, and that should do it. So basically, you can see if you want to treat it working in both ways, you could, and you could put a little switch if you wanted for that. But typically, if I'm using a plane, it's because I want some effect to wipe on. I don't want it to wipe back off after it's done. So that's why I usually don't keep the absolute value here and do it like that.